Hey guys, Drifter here. Yesterday I went to the beach as part of my vacation. It was very relaxing and I wanted to climb on this big rock, but I got distracted by the small pools of water with sun bouncing off of it down here below me. When I went down to take a look, I saw that each and every one of these pools was teeming with life. Each and every one of these pools, barely the size of my hand, was filled with all sorts of small fish, crustaceans, occasionally barnacles, just something starting their lives here in this small pool. And it reminded me of that old story, the metaphor, the parable, the one that I use on my channel so much about the fish in the water. They can't handle like the chaos of our hand coming in. But it was the perfect example about a limited viewpoint, about a small world, about not seeing the big picture. And that's kind of the end of the video. We're going to jump over to some Call of Duty Ghost gameplay here. But the parable, story, metaphor, whatever, it's not technically not a metaphor, whatever you want to call it, about the fish in the water. It's a somewhat religious one, kind of a creation story, but please bear with me because I'm going somewhere on this one. Essentially, God makes the heavens, the universe, and he makes a place for all his animals. All the fish live in the water. God comes down and asks the fish if he likes his creation, if he likes the water that he lives in. And the fish, knowing nothing else, just asks God, what the hell is water? Like, the fish had no idea he was in water. He just thought it was always there, in the same way that we live in air, and air is all around us, but we don't really think of it as being there. We think of it as being empty. And it's all about perspective. Sometimes you miss the obvious and important things in your lives because your viewpoints are small or insular or too narrow, or it's simply you're just so used to it you take it all for granted and totally forget that it's there. And that's what I wanted to talk about in today's commentaries, that outside viewpoint. Sometimes that can be a lifesaver. It can be the most useful thing in the world to get an outside viewpoint, somebody outside of the team, outside of the business, outside of the hospital, outside of your life, something like that. This is essentially what a therapist does. Now, they have training and technical expertise and practice on a lot of other things, but a therapist is going to sit down and you're going to explain to them the problems with your life, even if it's mental problems or, well, I guess, yeah, it pretty much has to be mental problems to be a therapist, or some sort of stressful event or a person that you can't handle or something that you have difficulty dealing with, and they listen, and then they're going to give you advice, but not from the perspective of your life. In your life, you're always trapped. I can't do this for some reason. I can't do that for some reason. I can't do... something is holding me back, so I've already decided that it's no good, that I'm not going to make this person angry, that this isn't... You just kind of shut these down, and you feel very, very trapped. However, the therapist isn't a part of your life like that. They're not, so to speak, trapped in that situation. They don't have that perspective, and they give you some advice, often tough love and harsh advice, that is the best for you, and they can see it, but you can't. A business consultant will do a very similar kind of thing. You own a business. I'll just say it's a frozen yogurt shop, and there's a million of those things these days. The business is failing. The business is struggling. It's having problems. You don't know why. You've tried your absolute best to save your business, but it's just not panning out, and you feel that you're missing something, so you hire a consultant to come in and take a look at everything that you're doing and try and fix it, try and make it right, try and put his perspective on the matter and help you out. The problem that we all run into, both in our personal lives and inside of organizations that we are a part of, be they business or fraternity, sorority, or otherwise, is that inside viewpoints tend to echo and magnify. The group reaches a consensus on something. They all either agree or begrudgingly agree or barely agree that something should be, this rule should be in place, we shouldn't do this or we should do that or something, and then the reasons for why have a tendency to magnify and bounce off of themselves and extrapolate and continue to go and go and go, even though the original may have been lost. And this is why groups have a tendency to grow more extreme over time. Believe me, I could talk about this all day, but I'm making it as short and sweet as possible. And a group, especially a well-established group or a successful one, or even in your own life, if you have habits that you establish, they become less open to experimentation or change. You get groupthink in a large group or amongst yourself. You just, this works, it's always worked, it's never not worked, I don't know why it's not working now, and I'm not going to change anything. So you get less experimentation, both for yourself and with a group. However, an outside viewer has no perspective to judge these things. They don't know why you made the decisions to begin with. They don't know the reasons reinforcing those, and they're also completely separate from your own personal echo chamber of thoughts, so their thoughts may be more clear on the issue than you are, and this is why their judgment can be useful. However, I say can be, and I'm being very particular about that, because that doesn't mean they're always right. Oftentimes, outside opinions are just completely and totally wrong, because on the flip side, they have no experience with the issue that they're being called in on, with what they're looking at, or with your life in general. They just don't have that experience. An outside observer or person might have no technical knowledge. If we're talking about businesses or sciences or organizations or something like that, they might not have that technical expertise or background that's needed to make all of this make sense. And one of the biggest problems is that they're not as clued in to unintended consequences. This has a tendency to happen with personal lives and inside a community. The advice they'll give you against an abusive parent or, say, a lover or something will be to fight back, and they might not realize that your particular problem might be so violent that you'll get hurt doing that, or unintended consequences. If you change the laws in one subtle way that you think are going to help a lot of people, you'll create a loophole that lets a lot of criminals out or screws over a lot of other people. So the outside opinions don't have to be right. They're just different. Sometimes they're totally wrong and should be ignored. However, other times they stumble upon completely brilliant ideas. The examples, two that I'll use today, a simple one is Gaston Glock. He invented the Glock pistol. Before that, if I'm not mistaken, he made vacuum cleaners. And Glocks were at the time, they're not as much now because it's old and the technology's been copied or whatever. Very unique and very different pistols, completely different from anything else on the market. And the reason he did this is because he decided to build a gun from the ground up. This guy made vacuum cleaners. He knew nothing about guns. He probably did afterwards, but he didn't want to be influenced by the traditions of the past, so he went and built his new gun. It was completely different, and in some ways better than other guns, in some ways not, but it was very interesting stuff. Another one that I can say will be Steve Jobs, even though he ended up inside of Apple Corporation very deep in the technology community. He originally wasn't the tech guy. Wozniak was. Steve Wozniak was the nerdy guy sitting at home working on his computer, building this sort of stuff. Steve Jobs was his friend, but Jobs had that outside perspective. Like, he wasn't a part of the computing scene, but he could look and see what it could become in the future, and he's one of the few people that was able to kind of carry that with him his whole life. People would build brilliant technologies expecting it to be used one way, but Jobs had this very sort of consumer oriented perspective where he could just see a much better way to use it, how people would love it more, and it was very, very useful. And we're coming near the end of the commentary here, just something I wanted to talk about. If you're having a problem in your life, if you're struggling with something, if your business has problems, if your hospital, your university, if all that's sort of going tits up and you're not sure what's wrong, one thing that can help is if you pull in a completely different outside perspective, be it a friend that just doesn't know the situation. If it's really bad, you talk to a therapist. If it's a big group thing, we're looking for a specialist in some kind of way. Maybe a specialist of a different field, just somebody that you never would have thought of, and just see what they have to say. Just kind of spitball with them and talk with them, and you'll get some interesting. Again, it may not be useful, it may not save your life, but they might stumble upon something key that you've completely overlooked because of your sort of internal biases against or for these things, and that can make all the difference in the world. I hope you enjoyed this commentary. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.